Some marriages are built on love, others on greed. Ava Coleman thought she had found the perfect man, a wealthy husband who would give her everything she ever dreamed of: luxury, travel, power, and influence. To the world, she was lucky. To her friends and family, she was living a dream. But behind the smiles, the glitter, and the parties, a secret plan was unfolding, a plan that would soon collide with the unexpected and the shocking truth that lay in Jonathan Brooks' will. She thought she was in control. She thought she could bend the world to her will. But some games are bigger than you, and some people are smarter than they appear. Some secrets are worth more than money, and some lessons can't be bought. Ava Coleman was 28, stunning, ambitious, and determined to rise above the ordinary. She came from a middle-class family in the suburbs, loving, but with limited means. While her friends dreamed of climbing the corporate ladder, Ava dreamed of something else entirely: wealth, influence, and a life where money answered every problem. Jonathan Brooks was 55 years old, a self-made billionaire with a reputation for generosity and discretion. He owned businesses across multiple states, had an art collection worth millions, and a heart for philanthropy. To everyone outside his inner circle, he was a perfect gentleman, someone who had earned everything he had through hard work, vision, and intelligence. And to Ava, he was opportunity. Cut to reenactment: Ava attending a charity gala, spotting Jonathan across the room. She adjusts her hair and smiles. This is him. This is the life I want. I can do this. I know I can. She wasn't looking for love. She wasn't looking for companionship. She was looking for security, a ticket to a lifestyle she believed she deserved, even if she had to manipulate her way to it. Her friends noticed the change. Her family noticed the shift in her priorities. But Ava was determined. She had a plan, and she was going to see it through, no matter the cost. Jonathan was charmed by Ava. He admired her confidence, her beauty, and the way she navigated social situations. They began dating, and within months, Jonathan proposed. To everyone else, it was a fairy tale engagement. To Ava, it was a victory. They married in a grand ceremony, attended by the city's elite. Guests marveled at the couple's chemistry, the opulent decorations, and the sense of a perfect match. But behind the smiles and champagne toasts, Ava had already calculated her next moves. Everything is falling into place. I just need to play my part, and the rest is mine. 4 months, she enjoyed the perks: luxury vacations, fine dining, designer shopping sprees, and exclusive events. She had access to his accounts, his contacts, and his wealth. To the outside world, they were inseparable. To Ava, it was a playground of possibilities. But wealth attracts attention and suspicion. Jonathan Brooks was no fool. And he had a keen sense for people's motives. Something about Ava's ambition made him pause, notice, and question, quietly, subtly, without revealing his suspicions. 3 years into the marriage, Ava began to notice small changes. Jonathan started spending more time in his private study. He became secretive with his documents and finances. And then, he started revising his will. At first, Ava assumed it was routine. After all, wealthy people often update their wills. But the timing made her uneasy. She asked casually, trying to hide her anxiety. "Just updating some things," Jonathan said, smiling politely. "Nothing you need to worry about." But Ava did worry. In fact, she started digging, subtly checking details, and trying to find out how much she was set to inherit. She was meticulous, determined, and confident she would secure her future until she saw the new will. Her heart sank. She had assumed she would inherit everything: the mansions, the accounts, the cars, the businesses. But the reality was different. Jonathan had left most of his fortune to charity, distant relatives, and foundations he had worked with for decades. Ava was left with a modest sum, almost nothing compared to what she expected. She felt betrayed, angry, and confused. How could Jonathan do this after everything? But what Ava didn't know was that Jonathan had been aware of her ambitions all along. And he had a plan that would soon turn everything on its head. As the months passed, Ava grew restless. The small inheritance she was left was not enough to sustain the life she had imagined. She started looking for ways to increase her control over Jonathan's wealth. Her charm had worked before. She thought it would work again. If I just suggest, he'll see it's reasonable. He trusts me. He has to. She made small suggestions, investments, charitable projects she thought were beneficial. But behind her suggestions was a plan, to position herself in ways that could influence the will, the accounts, and his decisions. What Ava didn't realize was that Jonathan had noticed. Every subtle move, every hint of manipulation, he saw it all. But instead of confrontation, he chose patience. He had learned long ago that some lessons are more powerful when people learn them themselves, the hard way. One evening, Jonathan invited Ava to his private study. The room was dimly lit, filled with the soft aroma of aged leather and polished wood. He gestured toward a chair. "Sit, Ava. I'd like to talk about something important." Jonathan slid a folder across the table. "I've updated my will," he said. "I want you to review it and give me your thoughts." Ava's eyes widened. Her pulse quickened. Finally, she thought, the fortune is within reach. She opened the folder, scanning the pages quickly, her mind racing. And then she saw it, the clause she had not anticipated. The inheritance was conditional. Any attempt to manipulate, coerce, or contest the will would result in complete forfeiture. Every action she had taken in secret, documented, observed, and now a potential trap. Jonathan watched her closely, the faintest smirk crossing his face. "Jonathan, come," controlled voice. "Everything you've done, Ava, every suggestion, every hint of control, has been observed. This is not about anger. This is about lessons. And sometimes, people need lessons in ways they cannot anticipate." Desperate, Ava tried again. She attempted to charm, to influence, to appeal to Jonathan's sense of reason. "Jonathan, I only want what's fair. Surely you wouldn't want to hurt me over misunderstandings," she said, her voice laced with false sincerity. But Jonathan remained unmoved. He had seen this before, in others who tried to bend the world to their will. Instead of confrontation, he documented everything meticulously, her intentions, her attempts, the exact moments she tried to manipulate him. Every email, every suggestion, every subtle attempt to alter decisions, he had records. And now, these records would become pivotal in a moment Ava could not predict. Jonathan working late, reviewing documents, typing notes into a secure system. Ava unaware, enjoying a night out, confident she was still in control. Ava grew increasingly anxious. The sense of control she once had was slipping. The hints Jonathan dropped, vague comments, slight smiles, quiet observations, unsettled her. She began to make mistakes. Accidentally sending an email she didn't intend to Jonathan's assistant, revealing her intentions. Jonathan received the email, calmly smiled, and added another layer to his plan. He didn't need to act immediately. The web of evidence was growing, and every action Ava took only tightened it around her. To outsiders, Ava was still living the dream: parties, vacations, luxury shopping. But inside, tension gnawed at her. Anxiety, paranoia, and desperation began to color her interactions. The very traits that had once fueled her ambition were now her undoing. Montage: Ava restless at night, tossing and turning, checking her phone obsessively, rehearsing conversations, trying to predict Jonathan's next move. One evening, Jonathan called Ava into his study once more. The atmosphere was different, quieter, more deliberate. "Ava," he said softly, "I need to show you something." He handed her a tablet. On it were records, timestamps, and documents that detailed her every attempt to influence, manipulate, or gain control over his wealth. Every message she had sent, every meeting she had orchestrated, every subtle hint of deceit, it was all there. She realized too late. The game she had thought she was winning, she had already lost. Jonathan had anticipated her moves, documented her schemes, and now held all the power. Ava's confidence crumbled. Her carefully crafted plans, her ambition, and her greed had all been transparent to a man who had planned every step of this lesson. Ava sitting, stunned, Jonathan leaning back in his chair, calm and collected, observing her reaction. In that moment, Ava saw herself as she truly was, ambitious, manipulative, and blind to the consequences of her choices. Her dreams of wealth and luxury had blinded her to reality. She had underestimated Jonathan, underestimated his foresight, and underestimated the power of patience and observation. And as she sat there, the weight of her actions finally hitting her, she realized there was no way to undo what had been done. Jonathan, on the other hand, remained calm. He had achieved what he had intended: the preservation of his fortune, the protection of his legacy, and the exposure of someone who sought to take it through greed rather than merit. The moment had arrived. Ava, once confident and in control, was now facing the consequences of her ambition. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, calm, composed, almost serene. "Ava," he said quietly, "I think it's time you understand the full terms of my will." Her eyes scanned the tablet, then the folder on the desk. And that's when she saw it, the clause she had not anticipated. If she attempted to contest the will, manipulate its terms, or influence any of Jonathan's decisions regarding his wealth, she would forfeit not just the modest inheritance she was promised, but everything. In other words, every scheme she had attempted now carried a cost she could not undo. She had assumed she could outsmart Jonathan. She had assumed her charm, ambition, and careful planning were enough. But Jonathan had anticipated every move. Every hint of greed, every attempt at manipulation, documented, time-stamped, and secured. Jonathan, calm, deliberate. "Everything you've done, Ava, every action, every suggestion, every attempt to control, has been recorded. This is not punishment. This is consequence. Some lessons must be learned the hard way." Reenactment. Ava gasps, her confident exterior cracking. Desperate, Ava tried one last maneuver. She leaned forward, her voice trembling but steady. "Jonathan, surely we can come to some agreement. I've been loyal, devoted. I deserve more." But Jonathan remained unmoved. He had anticipated this moment, the last desperate plea, and remained calm, his plan intact. Reenactment. Jonathan slowly shakes his head, leans back in chair, eyes soft but resolute. Jonathan calmly. "There is no agreement to be made, Ava. My will reflects my intentions. But I want you to understand something. Not everything is about wealth. Some lessons are worth more than money, lessons about integrity, honesty, and foresight." Her ambition had led her to this moment. Her greed, her scheming, all of it laid bare. And now, there was nothing left to do but accept the consequences. In the weeks that followed, Ava's life changed drastically. Her carefully cultivated social image began to crack. Friends noticed her desperation. Colleagues saw her anxiety. And as the media caught wind of a dispute over Jonathan Brooks' will, her reputation suffered further. She had lost not just the fortune she had pursued, but also the trust, respect, and social standing she once enjoyed. Reenactment. Ava walking alone in her luxury apartment, lights dim, city skyline outside, reflecting on her choices. Jonathan, on the other hand, executed his plan flawlessly. His fortune remained intact, largely redirected to charities, education programs, and communities he had long wanted to support. His will ensured that his wealth would benefit those who truly needed it, rather than someone who sought it through deception. Montage. Jonathan signing charitable donations, visiting foundations, overseeing projects, a sense of calm and satisfaction in his actions. And as for Ava, she received the modest inheritance she was entitled to, enough to live comfortably, but far from the life she had imagined. It was a lesson in ambition, greed, and the consequences of underestimating those who quietly observe and plan. Ava's story is a cautionary tale. It reminds us that appearances can be deceiving, and that greed, no matter how cleverly disguised, rarely goes unnoticed. Jonathan's patience and foresight ensured justice, not through anger or revenge, but through strategy, observation, and integrity. Sometimes, the most satisfying endings aren't about punishment, they're about lessons learned, quietly and inevitably. Reenactment. Ava walking through a park, contemplative, sunlight on her face, finally seeing the consequences of her actions. Jonathan in the background, donating books to a school, smiling genuinely. In the end, Ava had everything she thought she wanted: the luxury, the ambition, the life of dreams. But what she truly needed, understanding, humility, and self-awareness, she could only earn through the path she had chosen. And Jonathan? He had ensured that his legacy, both financial and moral, would outlast deception, greed, and false ambition. Some marriages are built on love. Some are built on money. And some are tests of character, of patience, foresight, and the ability to see through deception. If you enjoyed this story of ambition, betrayal, and a shocking twist, hit subscribe and click the bell. Hidden Tale Stories brings you real stories with real lessons and the justice that follows. Drop your thoughts in the comment section.